Welcome to Nacd BoardVision, where leading boardroom advisors, governance professionals, and seasoned directors discuss critical issues related to your responsibilities in the boardroom.
Welcome to this episode of NACD's BoardVision. I'm Peter Gleason, Managing Director and CFO of the National Association of Corporate Directors. I'm joined today by Don Keller, a partner in PwC's Center for Board Governance. Welcome back, Don. It's great to have you join us today.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Don, several months ago, the NACD convened a Blue Ribbon Commission to study the role of the lead director with a specific goal of increasing the efficiency and effectiveness of the person in that position. This commission is actually a follow-up to a similar one we did in 2004 on board leadership in general. The final report of the 2011 Blue Ribbon Commission will be released in October. We always get good feedback on our BRC reports, and we expect this one will be no exception. Don, your partner John Barry and I both served as commissioners this year, along with 28 other directors, governance experts, and CEOs. This year's co-chairs of the commission were Barbara Franklin, who's chair of the NACD board and also serves on several other boards, including Aetna and Dow Chemical. The other chair was Irv Hockaday, who serves as lead director at Ford. He's also on the board of Estee Lauder.
Well, I studied and provided input to the Blue Ribbon Commission's report and agree with the findings. We at PwC have researched the role of the lead director, and it certainly has evolved over time. With the current focus on governance and the role of directors, I agree that it's a very appropriate time for NACD to take another look at what has become a very prominent role.
The role has absolutely grown. 2/3 of the respondents to the 2011 NACD Public Company Governance Survey reported having a lead director, which is the highest since we started asking the question in the mid-1990s. And 88% of those with a lead director reported that the position enhances the board's effectiveness. The notion of a lead director to represent the independent members of the board was first identified in a 1992 Business Lawyer article by Marty Lipton and Harvard professor Jay Lorsch. But it took a decade for the trend to catch on. The boost came from the New York Stock Exchange. In its post-Sarbanes-Oxley reforms, the New York Stock Exchange required listed companies to provide contact information for the person presiding over the board's executive sessions. Many such presiding directors were given the title and duties of the lead director. So with that brief history, let's dive right in.
I think a good place to start is with the selection of the lead director, a process that requires great care. Of course, the lead director must be independent and able to find common ground and agreement among his or her fellow board members, but it's not as simple as that. The Commission agreed that the lead director should be a leader among leaders, able to balance collegiality among the directors with the ability to lead them. Someone with a domineering personality who competes for power in the boardroom is likely not a good fit for the role. But neither is a person who is overly conciliatory and too easily led. Again, the key is to find a leader among leaders.
That's a good way to describe it, Don. And effective leadership also entails sound business judgment and a solid understanding of risk management, strategy, financial oversight, and succession planning. And it should go without saying, but a solid understanding of the company's business and strategy are also critical.
I agree, Peter. Another point the report addresses is the role of the chair CEO in selecting the lead director. It is important for the CEO and the lead director to have a positive and constructive relationship, so the CEO should have input, but the CEO's opinion should not be the overriding factor in the selection process. Only independent directors should be allowed to vote on the lead director. The Blue Ribbon Commission also recognized that the lead director has many responsibilities beyond the typical duties as a director and will need to spend considerable extra time to properly fulfill the role.
That's right, Don. So it seems reasonable and fair that the lead director be compensated for the additional responsibilities and time spent. In fact, the BRC report includes a table on lead director compensation by size of company, and as you can see, the premiums are generally modest. Except for the microcap company category, which pays a third more on average, lead director premiums tend to be only about 15% higher than regular board pay, give or take a few percentage points.
I think directors, and particularly committees charged with director compensation, such as nominating and governance committee and/or compensation committees, will find that table very useful.
Another discussion among BRC members that we found especially interesting was the relationship between the lead director and the CEO, particularly with respect to mentoring. The Commission agreed that mentoring the CEO should generally not be one of the specific duties of the lead director. The Commission also acknowledged that it's not uncommon for a combined chair and CEO to use the lead director as a sounding board, but cautioned against letting the relationship become overly close. that could compromise the lead director's ability to adequately represent the views of the other independent directors, a key role.
Peter, I think that's an important point. The lead director and the others on the board should be alert to this possibility and the difficulties it could create. Another area of interest related to communications with shareholders and other stakeholders. These constituents are increasingly asking for face-to-face meetings with one or more independent directors, and many boards may look to the lead director to assume this role. However, the lead director does not always need to be the board's spokesperson. For example, if the topic to be discussed is executive compensation, the chair of the compensation committee may be the more appropriate board representative.
That's a good point, Don. This is something boards need to consider on a case-by-case basis. As we wind down this episode, let's take a bird's eye view on what the Commission sees as the role of the lead director today.
That's a good way to end, Peter. So let's highlight the first three aspects of the lead director's main roles as identified in the report. Provide leadership in a crisis. The lead director should be the point of contact for the directors and should coordinate the communication between the board and management. Plan for director succession. The lead director should work with the Nominating and Governance Committee to plan for normal succession of departing directors several months prior to the transition, and also identify underperforming directors and ensure they receive the counseling they need. Collaborate on board agendas. While agenda development should begin with the CEO, direct and timely collaboration with the lead director is important.
Thanks, Don. I'll pick it up here if I may. Give a voice to every director. Ensure that alternatives and constructive skepticism from the directors is heard. And be wary of the trap of groupthink. Conduct executive sessions. Likely the most visible job for a lead director, this role consists of leading and summarizing the discussion among the independent directors and communicating it back to the CEO. And finally, consider the bigger picture, identifying important or emerging trends, particularly within the boardroom and among board members. Don, it's been a pleasure discussing this with you, and as we both know, these are just some highlights of what is a very rich report. Thanks for being with us. In closing, I'd like to point out that the report of the Blue Ribbon Commission will be available the first week of October. That wraps up another episode of NACD's BoardVision. On behalf of PwC and the National Association of Corporate Directors, I'm Peter Gleason, and thanks for joining us.